recreation employee for a very long time when I lived in New Brunswick. And so I'm really excited to bring some of that background and that side of things to my presentation today. So as an ergonomist, I have the complete pleasure of being with people while they work and trying to do things to make their workplaces safer for them. And I'm going to be talking today about facilities work. So people making sure that the facilities stay at their best, ranging from electricians to, arenas, pool, aquatics maintenance, that type of thing, and parks, all parks employees, recreation employees, and we're just going to go through. There are so many different job titles within facilities, recreation, parks. I'm not even going to try to mention a third of them, but I will kind of go through with those jobs in mind so that I can hopefully draw in and center in on some of the reasons why maybe you attended today. So I always like to start off by just saying that this is just a very general coaching session. I'm an ergonomist and I've been in and out of so many different workplaces. So I'm bringing my experience and my knowledge and the evidence-based work that I've done to this AMHSA coaching session right now. If you have specific questions on different applications in your workplace, I am absolutely more than happy to talk to you about those. I have a hard stop today of 10 o'clock Mountain Time, but please send me an email or send me your email in the chat and we can connect. Absolutely happy to do that. So today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about musculoskeletal injuries in general. I refer to them as MSIs. So musculoskeletal injuries overview. We're going to be talking about how to locate those risk factors within those jobs. And we're going to look a little bit closely at musculoskeletal injury statistics and how we develop and what that might look like for somebody who isn't at the job sites, but maybe they are hearing about people with back injuries, people with finger injuries, people with neck injuries, and they're kind of trying to figure out like what's going on here? Why am I getting so many? Or why am I getting so many all of a sudden? Or why is it always in this one specific area? We're going to go through reducing musculoskeletal injury risk. We'll talk about, or I will challenge you to think about maybe some different types of tools and equipment. And we're going to go through some body awareness. And with body awareness, I really emphasize kind of a multifaceted approach with kind of 6 basic ergonomics principles that combine a few different injury reduction techniques. We'll briefly talk about some dynamic warm-ups just to get people excited and motivated to begin their work shift. And then there's going to be a Q&A. So I always like to start off with talking about what a musculoskeletal injury is in the first place. So musculoskeletal injury is an umbrella term that involves most of the body parts. So we're talking muscles, tendons, nerves, ligaments, joints, other soft tissues, and discs, the discs in between your spinal vertebrae, anything that's causing a worker to feel some discomfort. Sometimes that discomfort stays in one spot. Sometimes it migrates up the body. Sometimes it migrates down the body. Usually those kind of mean different things. When I'm asking people about discomfort, I'll ask, is it a stabbing pain? Is it a shooting pain? Does it start in one area and then move to another? Do you feel any numbness? None of those answers that they tell me are going to lead me to diagnose any injury. I don't diagnose injuries. I'm an ergonomist. But all of those things can lead me to think about postures or force demands that may have contributed to the kind of discomfort that the person is talking about. So we've got these risk factors displayed here on your screen. So some of the things that I look at, like the primary risk factors that I look at have to do with force. And when I'm talking about force, the easiest example is talking about lifting demands. So if you've got something that you're carrying or holding, or gripping or pinching, those are force demands. As an ergonomist, when I'm out on the job site, I measure these so that I can quantify them, so that I know in numbers, the employee has to squeeze with, 35 pounds to activate a hose, a power washer. Maybe they do that for, 30 seconds. Maybe they do it for 5 seconds. Maybe they do it for 2 minutes every 30 minutes. Those kinds of things are maybe going to lead into an injury. So, if it's a grip demand, I want to know how forceful that is. I also look at hidden loads, so kind of the hidden forces that our body has. So our head has a weight, our arms have a weight. If you like, you can bring your arms out to the side and you can see and you can feel for yourself that your arms have a weight. When you bring your arms out to the side, your shoulders will be working a lot harder to keep your arms in this position. So even if your hands aren't holding anything, there's still some forces being acted upon internally. So that's kind of where posture comes in. I like to look at postures. I like to see how people do the work that they do. I never think that postures are bad or good, but I'm always striving to get into, a neutral posture. And if postures are not neutral, then I look for why. Why aren't they neutral? It's okay to reach over your head and do something, but it's always a combination of, forces, awkward postures, and repetition and duration, how they interact together. Those things are going to result in an injury. So I look at postures, I look at repetition and duration. So by repetition and duration, I calculate and I look at, how often a particular activity, maybe a particular awkward posture or a particular force is applied during a minute or per hour or per week. I look at all of those things. Or is it just held for a prolonged period of time? Maybe you're replacing lights, maybe you're replacing all of the light fixtures at a particular location. That time with your arms over your head, you're going to want to make sure that there's some recovery time built into the shift to make sure that you've got different muscles working so that the other muscles and your neck can actively recover throughout the shift, so that you're not, getting into a job rotation where you're rotating into a job that's not actually giving some of your other muscles a break. I look at contact stress. So contact stress is a risk factor that I like to draw people's attention to, because if somebody is experiencing contact stress, so like an example of contact stress would be kneeling on a pool deck. So if you are kneeling on a pool deck, to talk to a patron or to complete CPR, that kind of thing, it's not going to really feel great on your knees. You're probably going to try and shift out of that posture as fast as you can, because kneeling on a slippery, wet ceramic tile pool deck feels terrible. I've done that. And so you're probably going to want to find out something that will help. That might look like, as part of your emergency procedures, if you're doing, I'm just kind of throwing things out. If you're doing CPR, maybe if another worker is assigned once they've done crowd control and EMS has been called and all of these things, maybe you're bringing a flutter board over so that when you're switching compressions and breaths and things like that, you can kind of relieve some of the contact stress for your fellow neighbor. And that's talking about pools. Most recreation and facilities and parks jobs and people facing jobs do require their employees to have CPR and first aid training. So you can get contact stress from anything. and I was just talking about knees. So contact stress is when the muscles and the soft tissues of your body are pressing against something. So usually people cannot tolerate contact stress for any portion of a time, so they adopt an awkward posture to avoid it. So I look at those awkward postures and why is that an issue? We look at vibration, jarring, so that might be handheld tools, it might be driving over rough terrain for a prolonged period of time. I look at cold temperatures and hot temperatures because those can influence force demands. It can also influence awkward postures. For example, if you're working in the cold, you might be wearing thick gloves to protect you from the warmth. If you're wearing thick gloves, it's going to change your force demands for gripping and pinching. You'll probably squeeze a little bit harder, pinch a little bit harder, just so that you can get that tactile feedback. And that could cause some discomfort. Hot temperatures, you're going to be sweating. You're going to be losing water from your body, and that can put you at risk for certain heat illnesses. Cold temperatures can be an issue with musculoskeletal injuries because if we've got cold muscles, they're not as flexible. Cold tendons are not very flexible, so you are more apt to become injured if you're working in very cold or very hot temperatures. And this is something that's very relevant for employees in parks and recreation and facilities, the facilities managers that are, or facilities attendants who are assisting those areas, to making sure that they can continue to do their jobs. I also have to talk about personal risk factors because we can be trying to do things as best as possible. And some things are just, going to put you at a higher risk for developing a musculoskeletal injury. So for example, if you have hurt yourself before, there's a higher chance that you are going to hurt yourself again. So by that, I mean, if you've sprained your wrist before, and you've recovered, our bodies are very good at recovering, but the muscles and the tendons, they're not quite as elastic with the scar tissue. So you will have to manage your injuries and your previous injuries well to avoid being re-injured. The back is very vulnerable to re-injury because of those very tender discs. Also, if you're somebody who has, poor nutrition or poor water intake, that's going to put you at a higher risk of injury. If you've got, so we're just going to try and make sure that we are our healthiest people when we come to work. And then we're also going to try and reduce some risk factors along the way. So why do we care about sprains and strains in the workplace anyway? This is the severity of claims by body part, and this is Alberta statistics, and these are from a few years ago. So the things that I want you to kind of look at, the biggest things are that the back and the spine had the greatest percentage of claims. And these are accepted lost time claims in Alberta. So 35%. So that's the largest piece of the pie here. Shoulders next. Okay, so when we look at the back and shoulder, that is taking up half the pie here. In terms of severity of claims, percent of claims made by Albertans in all different occupational categories. So we're talking EMS, equipment operators, fire, janitorial, office, police, public transport, sport and recreation, trades, warehouse. That's what we're looking at. So you can see the color breakdowns by body part, but as an ergonomist, I'm not super surprised that the highest severity of claims for musculoskeletal injuries are coming from the back and the shoulder, because those are, pretty large areas of our body. So just when we're looking at area of our body, that does make sense to me. Our back and our trunk is working all the time to support everything we do. So we want to try and make sure that we are adopting neutral postures as much as we can. And so with a neutral posture, I mean, you're sitting or standing with your ears above your shoulders, shoulders above your hips. Okay. And then if you're standing, we also want to aim to have your hips over your knees, over your ankles. Okay, so we always want to try that. And with the shoulders, we're always trying to have relaxed shoulders, but the elbows close to the body. Okay, so we've got a variety of different injuries here. So locating risk factors for injury is kind of the next step. So I spend a lot of my time doing this, and locating them can sometimes be easy to do. Sometimes it can be really hard to do. I always engage the workers that I work with because they always have honestly the best ideas, and they have the highest awareness. They are doing the job every single day, and they're intimately familiar with it. So I encourage you, if you're trying to figure out where injuries are coming from, go to the employees. Find out what kind of force demands they are encountering. Talk to them. I like to do employee surveys. And surveys can have all kinds of different things. So it might be a discomfort survey. Are you experiencing discomfort? When do you experience discomfort? Where on your body are you experiencing discomfort? When you are away from the job, are you still experiencing the discomfort? That can tell you a few different things. I also strongly encourage you to review the injury stats in your organization and to try to look over those injury forms as frequently and as often and as quickly as possible, and to follow up with employees who've written the injury report as soon as you can, just to further fine-tune things. Sometimes I look at injury reports and it'll tell me, you know, the person has a back injury and what they did was they picked up a pencil, and it's, Addie, can you help educate this person on how to pick up pencils properly? And I'm going, really? That's the kind of lifting training we need? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to ask the employee and the employer, you know, what is the employer's job? Like, what are they usually doing? Because I know that it wasn't picking up the pencil that hurt the employee. I strongly suspect it was the awkward back posture required to go down. Our body has a weight, like I mentioned, and probably in the many days and weeks and months and years leading up to picking up something from the bottom of the floor, some kind of threshold was reached. So I want to know what was happening well before that. What kind of back exposures, so from force and awkward posture, has that spine been exposed to? And we're going to see what those are, and then we're going to see if we can optimize those things. And then we're just going to try and keep pencils on shelves so that they don't end up on the floor. So another way of going through and finding out feedback from employees or maybe you notice that a particular job or zone or task is frequently flagged as, you know, maybe it's something that nobody wants to do. They fight over, you know, who gets to do this and who wants to do this. And some people like to do it. And, you know, if somebody's saying, oh, I like to do it because then I feel like I don't have to work out afterward. I'm going, oh, okay, well, that's good. But so it's requiring a lot of strength. So that should be the first. Okay, it requires a lot of strength. We want people to be fit, but we don't want work to be a workout. We want workout and strength training to be a choice. So just trying to find those opportunities and those tasks that could be particularly cumbersome. I've got a picture here of some lifeguards doing a rescue. I used to lifeguard, and you know, bringing somebody out of the water, it is a very hazardous task for multiple reasons. I mean, primarily, you've got somebody who you know is already injured, strapped to a spinal board, so they are very vulnerable. You need to make sure that you are protecting them at all costs. And I mean, that's dramatic, not at all costs. You do not want to put your own body at risk. Delete what I just said. You want to protect them as much as possible, but you also want to protect protect yourselves. And so where I'm going with this is that lifeguards practice this. They practice this technique all the time. They know that it's hazardous for the person on the spinal board. They know that it's hazardous to them as well. They know that they are in slippery conditions. They know that there's time demands. EMS is coming. Hopefully the person is still breathing, and that's fine. But they know there's time demands. And so they need to get the individual out of the water as quickly and as safely as possible, and safely to the victim as well as to them. So when lifeguards practice, they practice, with a few people. They encourage the help of bystanders. If they've got bystanders to assist, they're trained to know exactly what to tell the bystanders to do and where the bystanders can be the most helpful. They know the location that they are lifeguarding at, and they have already identified, before anybody enters the pool, they have identified the best places for removal. Okay, so those are some of the things that lifeguards do, because they know that bringing somebody out of the water can be hazardous to their bodies as well. They don't want to hurt their back pulling somebody out of the water. So they do, along with their employers, they do the research beforehand to find out, what are some things that we can do to safely get an injured person out of the pool, quickly and safely for everybody. So just identifying a lot of those dangerous tasks and trying to figure out how to manage them and make them less dangerous and less hazardous, because it's usually unpredictable things that get people hurt. So there are a number of different ways of identifying injuries, and there's a number of different ergonomics hazard screening tools. So one thing I'm going to just kind of go through right now is it's a sample job demand assessment. So a job demand assessment usually looks at, see that there, sorry about that. A job demand assessment looks at the work that the person is doing. And I encourage job demand assessments for every position. So a job demand assessment will break down the tasks, and it will identify how much time the employee spends doing each of those tasks. One thing that I like to do for hazard identification is just take a look at what some of the physical demands are. In terms of mobility, are they walking on flat ground? Are they walking on slippery ground? Are they climbing stairs? Are they climbing ladders? Are they A-frame ladders or vertical ladders? Both require different lower body and upper body movements. So depending on what kind of injuries you're looking at, in particular, if it's knee injuries, you want to look, are your facilities people climbing a ton of vertical ladders? And if they are they all necessary? Maybe they are all necessary, but just doing an investigation to find out. There might be some opportunities to bring in a man lift to reduce some of that ladder climbing, for example. You want to look at crawling. You want to look at percent of time standing, sitting, and what are they sitting on, and how long are they sitting on it? Is sitting on a hard stool for a prolonged period of time going to feel good? No, you're probably going to have contact pressure in your buttocks and in your thighs, and you're probably going to adopt some awkward postures to try and avoid some of how that contact pressure is. Same with standing. Are you standing on a hard surface, or are you standing in supportive footwear? Many of the lifeguards and aquatic staff that I work with are wearing supportive footwear with a closed heel strap. They know that if they jump in the water, they're going to get wet, and they're okay with that. But just having some kind of cushioning on the bottom that can prevent some contact stress on the bottom of the foot. And it encourages movement, which we want to see. We look at back postures. We look at, how often are people getting in and out of forward flexed back postures, or back bending backward bending. We look at twisting. We look at why. Why are people doing it? And when are they doing it? And what are the variables that we can control? There are so many variables out there, including weather and environmental concerns, that I encourage people in unpredictable work environments, such as parks and recreation and facilities, all of those jobs where you're interacting with the public, it's very unpredictable. So whenever you can control the things that are predictable, it will allow your body to respond optimally when you have to respond to something that's unpredictable. So I like to look at all the different postures, what is required and when is it required. I also look at lifting demands and carrying demands and other force demands. And then look for opportunities to maybe reduce some of the force demands. In particular, if people are telling me that they are doing it very often. If it's something that's happening constantly, if it's something that's happening frequently, I want to know about it. And then I like to weigh things. I weigh things all the time. And I encourage you, if you have employees that handle anything, find out what things weigh. That's an easy way of just providing some awareness. If we know that something is really heavy, then we're probably going to adopt a stronger posture and take a little bit more care, bring the object a little bit closer to our bodies so that we can get a good grasp on it before we lift it. If people perceive that it's something that's light, they might adopt, kind of a not very good posture. They might just stoop their back instead. A stooped back has a curve in it. You're not maintaining that lumbar curve. And that's not a very strong lifting posture. So just bringing attention to heavy items that people are carrying can encourage them to carry them a little, to adopt a stronger posture to do the lifting. If you are seeing people doing a lot of upper body work, that might be an indicator that they need something to stand on. They might need a platform. If it's not something that can be lowered to the person, then maybe you can raise the person to the device to make it a little bit easier for them. There's a lot of carrying. Maybe you can put things into a backpack or a bag, or use a cart, or use a utility cart, or wheelbarrow, or anything, just to try and reduce some of those demands. One thing that I encourage people to do is to find out, not only what kind of pushing and pulling demands are required while walking, but also arm work, pushing and pulling. In recreation and parks and all people facing jobs where first aid is required, first aid and CPR is required. I'm a strong advocate for having AEDs around because they will reduce the force demands on the person completing CPR. CPR, when done effectively, requires a lot of force demands on the provider. So the American Heart Association has said that effective CPR is completed using 100 to 125 pounds of downward force with extended wrist postures, pushing down. If you're not breaking ribs, you might not be doing CPR correctly. So it is very forceful, very satisfying if you can bring somebody back, but it is a very forceful task on the body. And so being able to swap out people providing CPR and bringing in that AED as fast as you can, getting EMS there as fast as you can, those are huge. So I just encourage you to find out what your people are handling and lifting and pushing and pulling and exerting force on, so that you can maybe get them to think of some ideas to reduce some of that. So organizations should be providing musculoskeletal injury prevention as part of their onboarding and employee training. And that can look like, hey guys, we've identified, some areas of the job that are, more straining than others. And so we've also have some techniques that we think you should be learning and then implementing those. It could be just establishing a really strong safety culture with encouraging people to report hazards and report unsafe conditions and to take action on unsafe conditions. So that could be, just cleaning up spills is a good one to, reduce exposure to slip, trips, and falls. Replacing burnt out lights, reporting and replacing burnt out lights. Letting people know that the lights are burnt out. I've been in some areas where they said, oh, we have this piece of equipment, but it's broken, and no one, it's not fixed. And it's like, well, why aren't you using it? And why haven't you reported it? Have you reported that it's broken? Oh, they won't do anything anyway. Well, they definitely won't do anything if you don't report it. So if you've got tools and people aren't using them for what you've brought them in for, find out why they aren't using them. Pickers for garbage and things like that. Those are absolutely fantastic. But if you've got one that has the pincher is broken, people aren't going to use it. Or if it requires a lot of force to grip, to activate that pincher at the bottom. So just asking the employees what they need. Maybe it's too short. Maybe they've got one and the person who's using it is very tall and they don't like to use the pincher because they have to be stooped over to use it. I mean, then you know why it isn't being used, and you can take a look and see if you can either replace the equipment or adapt the existing equipment. There's some telescoping ones that you can buy that will be a little bit more expensive than the fixed height pickers, but it means that your employee will use it, and it means that they won't develop back pain because of they're using it. Then I think it's worth it. So you want to encourage your employees to report pain and discomfort whenever they experience it, especially if it's on the job, because the sooner you know about something, the sooner you can take some action to alleviate that that discomfort for the employee. Minor sprains and strains are more easily recovered from than something that's very severe as well. So at the beginning of every season, and we're probably right on the cusp for some recreation jobs and parks jobs. Usually facilities work year round, but just bring in some training for musculoskeletal injury risk at the very beginning, so that people are at least aware of their body and just knowing that their body is important and you don't want them to develop any injuries. If you've got specialized tools and equipment that people are going to be using as part of their employment, please make sure that they know how to use it, when to use it, and how to use it best for them. That telescopic like garbage picker, or just the item that I was talking about, if people don't know that it telescopes, then they won't use it. They'll just use it at whatever fixed height they encountered it at the beginning. So if there's adjustability in your process, please make sure that people know how to use it and that they know how to use it best to fit them. This is kind of a little bit where I was talking about it before, but when you're going through the tools and equipment that you have, if you've got employees on the job that have identified an issue, maybe it's an issue that can be resolved with tools or equipment. Maybe there's spine boards that have different strapping. Maybe there's positioners that you can get. Maybe just evaluate what you have, what's broken, throw out broken material, replace broken material, ask staff what they need, and then see how it's being used. See if it's being used properly. I think I mentioned this before, but if you see a piece of equipment that is not being used, find out why it isn't being used. it might not be the right tool for the job. I remember being in a facility, this has happened quite a few times, but just recently I was in a facility and they had a jib crane for lifting things, and the employee wasn't using it. And I asked why, and they said, well, because it doesn't reach. And so it's kind of a matter of, oh, okay, well, let's make sure the pallet is delivered over here instead of over here. And then you can, be using these attachments on the jib to move your things. So sometimes it's just a matter of fine tuning. Personal protective equipment at work is always huge. I find it striking in different specialties like this. So I think the chat is open. We have a couple of minutes. I just wanted to find out if anybody is having challenges or has had challenges or found really great things about PPE that has made the job better from a musculoskeletal injury point of view. If it's been a challenge, I'd love to hear about it. One thing that I love about uniforms is that if people are wearing uniforms, they are more comfortable getting them dirty. And if they're more comfortable getting dirty, then that means they're going to be bringing items closer to their body, keeping those elbows in, and they're probably going to be doing, better manual handling techniques because they're wearing, a uniform or an apron or something like that. So, that's an example of when PPE can be really great. I see we've got, I'm going to try and get to the chat here. So ice cleats. Oh gosh, ice cleats are definitely a massive challenge. So are we talking ice cleats on the ice rinks for the people who are doing maintenance on the ice rinks? Because there are a few different types. Okay, yeah, so Lisa says yes. My best advice with ice cleats is to try a few different types. Do you have the ones that go front to back or the ones that just go that are like the mid cleat? There's a few different types out there. And I always encourage the people who are wearing the ice cleats to get them on right before they go on the ice and take them off when they are not on the ice. Ice cleats are something that's come up with me a lot. I've been doing quite a few different types of rink work over the last year, and it's big. So try a few different types. And the different types might fit different people better. Make sure that they are fitting on the boots really well. And also kind of having that third point of contact can be really helpful too. Sometimes ice cleats are a little too powerful, and then they're kind of ruining the work that you're doing with it, smoothing off the finish. I've seen some people with doing really forceful activities while also balancing on the ice cleats. But the biggest thing is taking those ice cleats off when you are not using them. It's a challenge. Any other kinds of PPE? So gloves I've talked about. Make sure that they are well-fitting gloves. Make sure that there are a variety of different sizes of gloves and ice cleats, I guess, from that point of view, and that they are as thin as they need to be. If they need to be grippy, make sure they're grippy. If they are used for warmth, make sure that they are warm. If they need to be grippy and warm, then you want to get the thinnest gloves that you possibly can with a grippy surface, because you want to make sure that you are allowing your employees to still complete those tactile tasks. Another aspect of PPE that I encounter quite a bit is hard hats, and people who have to wear hard hats, and maybe they're doing a lot of neck flexion or neck bending or backwards extension while they're doing their work. And hard hats don't weigh that much, but I mean, our head has a weight to begin with. And when we put our head all by itself into an awkward posture, that's going to cause some neck strain. So if you're adding weight to the head, that's going to increase the amount of force on this awkward neck posture. So I encourage people to find, lightweight hard hats and optimizing straps if you can. If you can put on a chin strap onto the hard hat, that might change the angle of neck flexion or neck extension or sideways extension that the person is experiencing, because they might be really concentrating on a task, but also trying to make sure that their hard hat doesn't fall off. So chin straps can be really helpful there. And properly fitting. A lot of things in ergonomics come down to a proper fit. And I tell people that there's not ergonomic things. It's the interaction that can be ergonomic or not ergonomic, because it's a fit. We want things to be properly fitting. So my opinion on harnesses for weed whackers. So, so I'm not surprised. So we've got someone who says that some employees love the harnesses for weed whackers and some hate them. So I am a lover of harnesses for weed whackers. I always want to show people how to adjust them. I find that the people who don't like to wear them usually either don't know how to fit properly, or they can't get them to fit properly because the harness might not be big enough, or the harness might not be small enough, or it might get caught on something. So it's usually there's something about the harness that people don't like. So if it's getting caught on something, or if the strap is loose and it bangs on things, or kind of gets in the way of the weed whacker. But what I like about the harness for the weed whacker, and using harnesses in general, is because it can kind of free up the hands, and it also allows you to adopt a little bit of it's less forceful for the upper body, because the harness is taking on some of the weight, so that your arms aren't adopting the full weight of the weed whacker. And that's not to say that the weed whacker is heavy. They're usually like kind of 18 to 20 pounds, or probably 15 to 20 pounds, depending if it's gas or electric or whatever. But just being able to reduce force demands whenever you can reduce force demands is great. So I would try to see what you can find. Ask your employees, why do you like the harness? Why don't you like the harness? And then try to figure out what those barriers might be to getting them to like it. So thanks so much for participating in some of the discussion. And I love your feedback, and I want to help you figure out how to navigate some challenging PPE situations, because I know, especially in the winter, or not in the winter, with cold jobs like in arenas or hot jobs outside, environment is not predictable. And if we're working in the cold or hail or rain, you don't have that kind of job. So job control is a big thing. When demands are unpredictable, just recognizing them and having a plan with your employees. Once you see those clouds start to come in, and you think that there's hail coming or a thunderstorm coming, try to wrap up what you've got, because what you've got on the go, so that you can bring yourself in for safety, so that you're not going to be exposed. A JDA or interviews with your employee to find out what physically demanding jobs can be prepared for in advance, and planning to see what you can do to reduce some of the unpredictability, and practicing is really great. I'm going to go through a couple of these more slides just a little bit faster, but I really encourage training and employee involvement in the training. So having them talk to you about what their concerns are, what their specific hazards are, and how they think that they can reduce it. But keep in mind, looking for those interactions and those barriers. Same with why some PPE and some tools might work and some might not work. Sometimes it's a little something about the tool that is making people not want to use it. I strongly encourage on-the-job training and on-the-job pro tips from senior employees, showing, hey, this is why we do it this way. This is, it'll be safer for you. It'll be safer for the person that you might be interacting with, like the public member, and just having opportunities to practice and troubleshoot some of the regular scenarios that might happen and also some irregular situations. When I always learn when I am on the job site, but never more than when I'm with facilities and maintenance. They are like the best problem solvers I know. I try to bring them into different brainstorming activities whenever it's appropriate, but maintenance is always encountering environmental challenges that's just part of their job. Problem solving, trying to figure out how to fix this light because it happens to be the only light in the area, and when the light's burnt out, it's dark, and so that's annoying for the people, but then it's also challenging for the person who's replacing the light because they have to replace it without any ambient light. So sometimes it means they're bringing in some lights, they're bringing in a ladder, they're bringing in a step stool, they're bringing in a headlamp. Then we've got weight on the head. Maybe they think it's the light, but then it turns out it's the ballast. So there's a lot of back and forth when you're trying to troubleshoot some of those unpredictable jobs. Recreation, and parks to some extent. You're dealing with children and people a lot. So just having those scenarios with staff beforehand, before things get crazy. Practice all kinds of different situations that you might encounter, with people. Maybe somebody getting hurt, somebody getting stuck in a child's swing, for example, one of the baby swings. You've got, a 10-year-old who, decides that they can get into this child swing, and now you have to get them out. And that's not going to be super easy. It's going to be pretty physically challenging for all of you. So anything that has to do with children and sports and learning and skateboard parks for one thing. There's organizations that have skate parks, putting those together, the boards together, the fasteners together, making sure everything is really safe. And then you've got the patrons using these, the skateboard parks, arenas. There's so many different variables that can happen. Just making sure that you've empowered your staff to think about how to help them through these. So I do encourage some warm-ups to work, but what I want to just spend my time on for the next couple minutes is some key principles to try and encourage your staff through different problem solving. So trying to make sure that whenever they can do some designing for work, that they are keeping items and keeping loads and forces in their green zone. So green zone means that you're working with a straight-ish back and your elbows close to your body. So you've got the brunt of the load directly in front of you. So maybe that looks like if you're picking up a child, you're squatting down, you're getting really low to the ground, getting the child very close to you, and then standing up. Okay, so you want to place commonly handled items right in front of you. We also want to reduce working with the hands below shoulder level as often as possible. So one way you can find out, if your employees are working with their hands above shoulder a lot is, and maybe you're also showing high shoulder injuries in your workplace, is spending some time with them and finding out oh, these are all of the different tasks that they're doing with their hands above the shoulder level. Maybe you have a job demand assessment or a PDA that you can take a look at, a physical demands assessment that you can look at to see what kind of exposure they are, and also talking to your staff. What are the things that you're doing when you're working with your hands above your shoulder, and then trying to brainstorm ways of either bringing the work down to the staff so that they can work at a good height, or bringing the staff up to them. Maybe it's adding platforms, maybe it's adding fixed platforms so that it's not going to be wobbly when they move. I also love the idea of using clamps or fasteners or something to steady the work so that you've got both hands freed up. Okay. Oh, there is a note about lightweight tools. So I want to caution you on all types of lightweight tools because, especially in facilities, some tools are very heavy for a reason. So try and find out if some of the tools that you're using are heavy because they're reducing the force that the person needs to exert, or if they can be light. If they're lightweight, then have at it. So with reducing shoulder injuries, we want everybody to be working with relaxed shoulder postures as often as possible. So we carry stress in our necks, and shrugging the shoulders and doing anything above the head, that also increases the load on the muscles. So just being able to recognize when you might be encountering a lot of stress, or if you are working with the shoulders raised, see if there's things that you can do to kind of reduce that. On the same note as shoulder postures and keeping the elbows close to the body, I encourage people to make sure that they've got their items as close to them as they can, so they can have their elbows close. This might look like putting on a harness to be able to do weed whacking, so that you're able to work with everything close to your body, so that you are working with reduced loads. It might mean moving items that you're no longer using away from you so that they're not in the way. I encourage people to move their feet so that they don't have to bend forward to get to something. Try to keep things in these close zones. So this green zone, it is the green zone. Here, let me see if I can do this here. So it is a green zone because you've got your elbows close to your body. This is my green zone. So I've got elbows close to the body. I want all the things that I touch frequently to be right here. The cautionary zone, we've got shoulder flexion. We want things to be here less often. It's okay. It's not dangerous. It's just less often. Okay. The red zone means that we are flexing our back and extending our arms. So this is a pretty big reach zone. It's the biggest envelope. We want to have people in there minimally. We recognize that sometimes people do need to get out, but we want to design work so that work is close. Okay, so bringing things close to people, bringing items close to you before you lift them, maintaining a lumbar curve when you're doing your lift. So maintaining a lumbar curve, you're encouraging people to stick out your bum, maintain that lumbar curve. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor here, but we want to maintain the lumbar curve. You want to kick out your leg if you need to. We don't want to have a stooped back posture, because that's going to put your spine at a higher risk of injury. Okay. Make sure you've got your feet well positioned so that you are steady and in control of your movements, and then bring things forward. You always want to set up your work so that you are looking at your work with easy, neutral neck postures, neutral back postures. It's okay to sidestep. It's okay to, twist gently at your knees a little bit, if it means keeping your back from twisting. But keep in mind, if you're twisting your knees, that's not really great for your knees. Some people ask, oh, well, can I just tell my my staff to make sure that they're twisting at their knees instead of twisting at their back? Well, yeah, you can, but it's not going to feel very good on their knees. Once in a while is fine, but not a lot. I can't get this to strength forward. Another thing you want to make sure that you're doing is that you are keeping your knees in alignment. You want your knees to be directly over your feet. The knee is strongest when it's aligned with your hips and ankle, and that's the joint as well as all of the muscles that connect from your hips to your knees to your ankle. Okay, so make sure that people are adopting really good postures. Whenever anyone's working with tools, you want to make sure you've got a really great grip. If you've got a well-fitting tool to the hand, then people are going to use less strength to keep it going. Okay. I love it when I go into different workplaces and they've got different sized grips for different tools, because we all don't have the same size hand. And if something is slippery, try to put on a glove to make sure that that's improving your grip. Okay. When possible, change, design jobs so that you've got some movement breaks in between, so that you're able to give some muscles a break while other muscles are working. When ergonomists are talking about movement or posture changes and posture breaks, we don't mean we want you to lay down for some parts of the job. We mean we want you to stop squeezing. If you're doing a lot of squeezing, we want you to let these hands have a little bit of a break, and you can move on to something else. Okay. Same with if you're doing a lot of back flexion tasks. I know a lot of maintenance, a lot of facilities, you know, a lot of the gardening and the grass and the sprinkler systems, the irrigation, all of that is low. So if you can alter your posture between kneeling on a kneeling pad or on soft grass, kneeling, squatting, bending, just rotating the muscles that are working, that's going to be really good, and taking other little breaks. So to kind of sum up all of the things that I've been talking about, you want to make sure that you're involving the employees to locate the risk factors, and also methods to try and reduce them. You want to make sure that people are warming up a little bit to work. Maybe it looks like a stretch program. Maybe it looks like, you know, taking a walking break with coffee to start off your day. You want your employees to move a little bit before they have to do a physical job. You don't want the physical work that they're doing in their job to be the first physical activity that they've done for the day. If you've got more experienced workers on staff that have tricks to the trade that can help incorporate some of these ergonomics principles, you know, keeping the load close, keeping things in the in your green zone, just being able to find all of those tricks to make it safer for the body. That is the best thing. And I'm sorry, we only have a couple minutes left.